welcome back to another true crime story video. Today I've got quite a short but also a very terrifying, uncomfortable story to tell you. In today's video I'm going to be talking to you about the night an entire family was murdered in their own home, bar one, and how it took 34 years for this lone survivor to get justice. Before I get into it, there is going to be a mention of sexual assault. As always, if this isn't something that you want to hear about, then that's okay. I shall see you in the next one. But for those of you that are still interested in this story, let's go. We are located in Denver, Colorado, on a snowy January 16th, 1984, at around 11:30 a.m. And this story revolves around a woman called Connie Bennett, her son Bruce, and his wife Deborah. One morning, Connie gets a phone call about her son and his wife. It was her brother calling to say that both Bruce and Deborah hadn't shown up for work that day. They both worked for him, so Bruce's uncle, Connie's brother. They were regional distributors at Bassett Furniture. It wasn't long before that Connie had seen the both of them, because it was Bruce and Deborah's daughter's birthday the day before. So they all went over to their house to celebrate with the daughter. They have two daughters, one called Vanessa and one called Melissa. And Melissa was celebrating her 8th birthday, while Vanessa is 3 years old. Immediately after the phone call, Connie rushed over to the house, because them not showing up for work is a bit worrying, because it's not something they would normally do. And the scene that she was met with was something out of a horror film. In the kitchen, Bruce Bennett was found dead on the floor. He had been hit in the head and the face with a hammer, and his throat had also been cut. They moved on to the main bedroom, where they found Deborah Bennett's body. She had been bludgeoned to death. They entered the girls' bedroom, where they found the body of Melissa Bennett. She'd also been hit with a hammer, but also sexually assaulted. Now, Vanessa Bennett was found between the wall and the bed, very much nearing her last breath. There were firemen at the scene, and they wasted no time in getting her to the hospital to get the care that she needed. And thank God they did, because Vanessa is actually alive and well today. Whilst being interviewed a few years ago, she was asked if she could recall anything about being in the hospital, and she said she doesn't remember much, but she does know that she didn't have to have someone tell her that her parents were dead, because in her own words, she got the picture. That kind of tells us a lot about what you could see there, what you could hear, just everything like that. You can tell it was a truly terrifying night. Now, who's responsible for this? Who did this? They first looked at the people that were at the party, because they were the last ones to see the family. There was Connie and her other two sons, Richard and Daniel. The celebrations ended at about 9 p.m, and as they were leaving, Richard told Connie that the garage door was still open and to remind Bruce to close it. But for some reason, he didn't close it. It stayed open. So that means easy access. When they were looking for evidence at the scene, the hammer was nowhere to be found. That's a major piece of evidence that they just couldn't manage to locate. But what they did find was a knife laying outside in the snow. This was the same knife that was used to cut Bruce's throat. But as these stories always go, they weren't able to get a fingerprint from it. So the hammer's nowhere to be seen and the knife isn't usable. Now what? They were searching the girls' bedroom when they found more evidence, and what they discovered was pretty damning. They found semen on the carpet where Melissa was found, and also on a white bed comforter that was covering her. In this day and age, this type of evidence is some of the best you could get. There's only one person that's going to create that kind of DNA. So again, in this day and age, that sort of evidence shows up, it's over for the person responsible. But we're talking about the 80s, so technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. So once again, this evidence wasn't enough. So just to recap where we're at right now, nothing that they have found could help them confirm who the killer was. And just to top it off, there were no eyewitnesses. Nobody saw someone go into the house. Nobody saw or heard anything. Now fast forward 2 months, and Vanessa is still recovering. Her head and face were bandaged up pretty badly, But it wasn't just her physical wounds that needed healing. She was also speaking to a therapist. And when thinking about a 3-year-old that has just been through everything that she has, of course you'd think she needs therapy. She needs to talk to someone. She needs help processing it. And while she's talking to the therapist, they keep asking her what she remembers. But she doesn't have an answer because her mind is blank. She doesn't recall anything. But they just keep asking her the same questions over and over again, trying to get something out of her. But if you don't remember something, you can imagine how agitated she was. And that's exactly what happened. She just got angrier and angrier. We're going forward quite some time to 2001, where technology has evolved. Finally, they were able to start analysing the evidence and extracting DNA. From this, they were able to determine that it was somebody from outside of the family, meaning that they didn't have to suspect that it was anybody with the family that night. Going forward again to 2018, 34 years after the murders, and Chief Deputy D.A. Kellner, Detective Connor and Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick come together to try and narrow in on a suspect. Dr. Fitzpatrick uses sites such as Ancestry.com and 23andMe to find a close match to the DNA that they had extracted from the evidence, and it took her less than a week, and she was already calling the detectives with a last name, Ewing. That's not a common last name. That's very specific. On July 10th, 2018, the detectives got a call from their boss to tell them that a direct CODIS match had been made, and it was a 58-year-old inmate in Nevada. He'd been in prison since August 1984, and his name was Alex Ewing. Dr. Fitzpatrick really did her job. She didn't just pluck a name and go, that's close. She narrowed in. His records show that he was arrested only 12 days after the Bennett family murders. He was in Arizona when his name popped up on the police's radar because he had bludgeoned a man to death with a rock. He then bludgeoned 2 more people with an axe handle, but they didn't die. After that, he was arrested and convicted for attempted murder. Looking at his weapons of choice, apart from the knife, everything's quite blunt, isn't it? Obviously has a huge impact, but everything's blunt. He's not going for the sharp things. He's like a hammer, a rock, and an axe handle. I've got nothing more to say on that. It's just odd, isn't it? Anyway. On July 12th, 2018, they spoke to Ewing and told him that all of their evidence points directly to him. He denies everything straight off the bat and says that he wants an attorney. Okay, so this is the route we're taking. Fine. We'll go to trial. He's granted his wish. He gets an attorney. They go to trial. But everything didn't go the way he wanted it to. Because obviously he wanted it to come back that he had nothing to do with this. But it didn't. He pleaded not guilty, but the jurors definitely thought he was guilty. They found that his motivation for the family murder was just a, and I quote, bloodlust for violence. Alex Ewing was charged with first-degree murder of the Bennett family and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences on top of what he was already serving. So even though it took 34 years, Vanessa Bennett finally got justice for what happened to her and her family. It's kind of scary how somebody can get away with something like that for so long just because they didn't have the technology back then. It's scary to think that, is that stuff happening today? Probably. Now in 20 years time, they're going to be like, now we have the technology. And I cannot even begin to imagine what Vanessa went through that night. Obviously the entire family went through it, but I feel like for Vanessa that's the most traumatic thing somebody can go through, seeing their entire family dead, die in front of them in such a brutal, horrible way. Today's video has really hit me deep, and I don't know I don't know why. Anyway, if you did enjoy, like and subscribe. You know where all the buttons are. I'll be back next week with a brand new true crime story, and I hope to see you there.